All right, Morgan, we're back. So
Yeah,
this is part four in the series, Linehaul valuations. All right. So
excited.
yeah, this is good. It's been really interesting to hear everyone's different opinions, and like we talked about it recently, how it's just no one has one set opinion, no one does it one particular way. So the best thing we can do really is just go, hey, let's get all these experts, people who know what they're doing, who have their feet on the ground, who are doing this, and just tell us your opinion, right? Then whoever's watching can decide how they want to do it. Maybe we'll find some common ground, maybe not. Maybe some harsh words will be tossed around. I mean, we'll find out here. But we still have Rico in Stardom timeout, so it'll be you and me kind of holding it down. Let's do this. Let's just jump into it, right? Let's bring
Yeah.
on our guest. We have someone who really knows a lot of contractors, works with a lot of contractors, and she is very focused on not only running operations, but also heavily in the financials, which everyone, when they look at valuations, is asking for historical P&Ls. I want to value it this way. And I think this will be a really interesting discussion to kind of get us to a place of what's important and what's not important. So with that being said, let's welcome on Becky from Linehaul Central. Welcome, Becky. It's good to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for making time. Really appreciate it. So I like to start these all the same way, which is asking a blanket question, and then we'll take it wherever we want it from there. And it is this. Let's say you're ready to go and take on a line haul business, right? And you're looking at a business, you have one assigned solo run, one assigned team run, and one unassigned solo run. What do you start to think about as you're going into this deal? How do you evaluate it for yourself so that you know you're going to get a good price on it? What's going through your mind?
Am I buying these runs?
Yes.
Okay. So being a finance person, the first thing I'm going to do is look at financials. Now, I'm not going to look at their historical financials because I could care less what they've done in the past. What I'm going to look at is their settlement statements. So I'm going to want at least 3 months of settlement statements, and not during peak. I want them just like a normal time period. So say through the summer or something like that. And I want their payrolls. And then from that, I'm going to do my own estimate of what I think that company can do revenue wise and what their expenses should be. So I know a normal line haul business about how much payroll should be, how much trucks should be, how much fuel cost is going to be in there, all of that. And so I'm going to do my own P&L and figure out what I think I can do with this business, not necessarily what they did with the business, because they're not going to be running it anymore. And then once I figure that out, then I can take, what I think a decent multiple is, and then I'm going to value the business that way. I always look at dedicated runs and unassigned runs differently. It used to be unassigned runs were worth a decent amount of money. Right now, I don't know that I'm going to pay a whole lot for an unassigned run, just because with the way freight is right now, it's down. Unassigned runs are sometimes they run, sometimes they don't. So I'm going to probably not pay much for that. I'm always going to look to see, those dedicated runs, make sure they're in the first position or the second position so that they're not getting cut, because right now they are cutting dedicated runs. And if you're in the first or second position, you're always going to be running. I look at the terminal that they're running out of. I want to be in a terminal in a city where I think there's growth opportunities. I'm not going to want to go into small town USA where nothing's happening. And I'm going to be wanting to run to terminals that are also in places that are in growth mode. I live in small town USA, right? But I don't necessarily want to go there if it's not growing. I actually live in small town USA that is growing. But if I lived in a different city in South Dakota, they're not growing so much. I maybe wouldn't really want to start out my business there.
Yeah, no, fair point. And you bring up like two very important sizes. So when you're going to evaluate a business, you're looking at the technical side, which is the financial side, and then the fundamental side, right? Is growth prospects, are the runs good?
Yep.
So I want to kind of just quickly hone into the technical side. So, you don't necessarily care about historical P&Ls, which is honestly refreshing to hear, because, for me, I look at it as if you're looking at historical P&Ls, it's kind of like driving while looking in the rearview mirror. It's like Eventually you might end up in a ditch. You can't run the way someone else ran it. And whatever fuel happened in the past doesn't necessarily mean what's going to happen in the future. So let's say, technical side on creating a pro forma P&L. So you're taking those 3-ish months worth of settlement statements, And then are you also looking at the A1 to make sure, like kind of corresponding the run totals to what's on that A1? So those assigned runs, and then that's how you get your top line for those assigned runs.
Yep.
Do you ever then how do you evaluate like the top line for a unassigned run? Or sorry, better question, do you put any value on unassigned runs? I know you mentioned not so much, but is there any value at all?
I will put like the unassigned runs in the revenue just to kind of see what I think that business can do. But I'm also going to look at that unassigned run and really look to see how much it actually ran. Does it, is it supposed to run 7 days a week and it, averaged 4 days a week? And so I will add it. I usually do add it into my pro forma, but then when I'm doing my multiple, I'm probably going to not pick as high of a multiple if it was an assigned run versus an unassigned run.
Good point. And so on the unassigned runs, do you still go with 3 months non-peak settlement statements, or
Yep.
do you ask for more? Okay.
Nope, I'll just take the 3 months. I just like to look at it, and I want the most current 3 months, because if you give me the 3 months from 6 months ago, freight could have been up or freight could have been down. I want the most recent 3 months because that gives me a better idea of where we're at currently. And then if I know, like right now, if I was looking at a business, I know in the next few months it's going to be peak, right? And so I know that the business can, increase during peak. But I don't necessarily build my pro formas with any kind of peak in it, just in case. We always hear peak is going to be this huge thing, and then half the time peak isn't really all that huge. So I don't necessarily add that in, because to me that's gravy if we do get a really good peak season. So I don't build that into my pro formas.
Oh, music to my ears. I love everything you're saying, Becky. All right, so we have our top line figured out. So now we're going and we're kind of estimating, what are going to be our expenses. So 3 big buckets being our fuel, our labor, and our truck costs, right? How do you look at fuel? How do you factor that into your pro forma? How do you determine that figure?
So when I look at it, when I do the top line revenue, I take the fuel supplement out of the top line revenue so that I'm basing everything off of trip revenue. And so basically I look at it as fuel revenue, your fuel supplement and your fuel expense are a wash. And so those two kind of, even each other out. Now, if I happen to be able to buy my fuel really good and I make money off of it, again, that's gravy, but I don't calculate that into my pro formas. So I'm really looking at trip revenue as the top line. And then I take my truck expenses and my payroll against that trip revenue. And so now I'm going to look at their payroll expenses to see what they're doing with payroll, because that's what I'm going to end up starting with, right? But I also know that if they're overpaying, I might want to get rid of some of those drivers and try to get cheaper drivers. But that's what I got to base my pro forma off of that, because that's where I'm going to start.
Yeah, so that's a good point. You're saying, you're trying to find where you could improve on your profit there, right? So when you look at someone's payroll journals, and how do you determine that they're overpaying or if they're underpaying? How do you kind of set your market in your head?
I look to see like what the percentage of trip revenue is based on their all-in driver price. I know this is what they're paying for payroll. What do they have for benefits? Because you're going to have to carry that over. How much are their payroll taxes? I usually figure about 10% for payroll taxes, but, it might be more or less depending on what state they're in. And then from there, I look at what I know other things are going to cost for a driver, work comp, all that kind of stuff. So I know my all-in price should be in that. I try to keep it in that 45% for if they're solo runs, a little bit higher if it's team runs. They're usually in that 50 to 55% range. So if my all-in payroll and expenses for driver are between 45 and 55, then I'm good. So if their driver costs are shooting me up in that like 75%, I know they're overpaying. Plus I know about what, I work with a lot of contractors, so I know about what they should be getting paid for solo runs, team runs. So I can just look at what they're getting paid to see if it's within the norm.
Yeah, good point. And a question kind of for both of you, because both of you deal with a lot of contractors right now. Are you finding it difficult to find new drivers to put in the seats?
Depends on the area.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing. Some markets are tougher than others, but for the most part it's been pretty good, but there's still a couple hotspot areas out there.
Yeah, and then there's some areas where, there's tons of drivers. Texas, for example, everybody I've talked to, there's a lot of drivers in Texas.
Yep. Texas and Florida seem to be pretty big spots where
Yep.
there's big driver pool.
Yep.
Is there any area you would maybe not necessarily advise to stay away from? You can if you want to, but right now where it's difficult to find drivers, or difficult to go into? Anything on top of your head?
Denver has always been difficult, I think. Montana's difficult. There's just certain states that it's really hard to find drivers.
Mm-hmm.
California's not been that easy.
Yep.
The Jersey market tends to get a little tough just because of the amount of stations and hubs that are over in that area.
Right.
Yep. Good point. All right. So technical side down, we got it. I think you've made great points. It seems very in line with what we do. Now on the fundamental side, you talked about the positioning on the runs and then where the runs are geographically for growth. How much weight do you put on the technical side versus the fundamental side toward your multiple? How do you start to put that all together and determine the multiple?
I kind of look at both of them together, because a business can do really, really good. You think you're going to make a lot of money, but if that's all I want to do is I just want to buy that business and that's it. I don't want to have more than that. Then I'd probably put more weight on the financial side. But if you're really in it to grow, then I'm going to probably put a little more weight onto the growth side, just because, if the easiest place to grow is in your own home terminal versus branching out into other terminals. And I always tell new people not to branch out, because the more locations you're in, the more difficult it gets to manage that operation. So until you get your feet wet and you really know what you're doing, you should probably stay in one terminal. And if you really want to grow and there is no growth opportunities there, then maybe that's not the right business for you and you should just pass on it.
That's a really interesting tip. So where you think about when you're going to a terminal, you think about going deep there first before you go wide and spread yourself too thin. I think that's a really interesting point. Although part of the growth process is expanding to other markets, it's kind of a good, I would say, and maybe Morgan, let me know if you agree with this, where it's a good idea for the contractor to go, hey, try to grow where you are. One, to get your feet, in the door and just understand the process, see what you can do, and then expand from there. Is that kind of how you think about it too, Morgan?
Yeah, I think home growing is sometimes easier just because the terminal knows who you are, a senior manager knows, they know your reputation, they know what kind of business you're bringing to the table. So being able to grow internally kind of gives you that upward momentum, as opposed to trying to get into a brand new location that, might have 100 different applicants that apply who doesn't know you from the guy down the street. So being able to grow internally, I think definitely has its benefits. And to Becky's point, when contractors start to spread themselves thin and have trucks in all these different locations, you tend to see a poor business when that happens, just because you can't be in every single location. And unless you have a manager at every single location that's overseeing the operation every single day, it becomes tough to manage it.
Good points. Let me ask you this. Should a new entrant to Linehaul bother going into a terminal with a lot of contractors?
I mean, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if you're a new contractor. If there's room, there's opportunities there, and you don't know, just because there's a lot of contractors there, some of those guys might be getting ready to retire and you can pick up other runs. Some of them might be failing. Just because there's a lot of contractors there doesn't mean they're all good contractors. And there's also opportunities to learn from those contractors too. If you can find one or two of them that are willing to help you out and mentor you, especially if you're brand new and don't know anything about FedEx, that's a great way to learn.
I'm so glad that Becky said that. I've talked with countless number of contractors throughout my years at FedEx, and I've met a lot of contractors who are willing to help those new ones, who absolutely want to see people succeed, because there are so many contractors that understand they can't be the only ones. You've got all these operations that are growing. They cannot be the only one that's inside of the terminal doing this day in and day out. It doesn't make sense to do that. But then on the other hand, I've spoken to other contractors who are so against helping others because they want to be the top dog inside of the region, and then It just, to me, I think that sharing is absolutely acceptable. It's to me as a senior manager, when I was there, I liked seeing that. I absolutely encouraged that. And I knew my contractors that I could go to say, hey, look, I have this guy struggling with something, can I refer him to you? Can you help him out with this? And they would say absolutely, because I think it's wild that somebody wouldn't want to help.
Yeah. Good points. That's actually good to hear, because I certainly have had that question a lot when there were prospective contractors calling and kind of being like, well, I don't know if I want to compete. I don't know necessarily, it feels too crowded, where it's like, well, that can be a really beneficial thing, especially for a new contractor. Makes complete sense. All right. Fundamentals, technicals considered. Let me ask you this. What is the multiple? Let's say those businesses that we talked about in the beginning, you feel good about it. Technicals seem sound. Fundamentals seem sound. There's room for growth. It's a pretty good geographic location. What's the right multiple to assign to those runs? Is there one?
I don't know that there is a right multiple. It's what you're comfortable with. So, if you can pick up runs at like a 3.5 multiple, awesome. If there's a lot of good growth opportunity, you might be willing to pay a little bit more. So that's where that whole growth thing comes in. I might be willing to pay maybe a 5 multiple. I'm probably overpaying for that business, but I know there's some great growth opportunities there. So, I might be able to get runs given to me if I do a really good job, things like that. So you might be willing to pay like a 5 multiple. I personally wouldn't go over a 5. That's just me. But, everybody's got to do what they're comfortable with and what they feel good about. You just want to be careful, because you don't want to overpay for your business, because as we all know, when you overpay, puts you in a bad position for starting, and it makes it a lot harder to make money. And I always, the other thing we haven't really talked about is trucks. So I always make sure that they have considered what trucks they're getting, if they are getting trucks, the age of the trucks, are they going to nickel and dime you to death, things like that. And you want to be able to have room in there if you're going to have to buy new trucks, or you're going to lease trucks or something like that, to make sure that you can do that. So that all plays into it as well. Like I said, I personally wouldn't pay over a 5, but it's whatever you feel like you can afford and what you're comfortable with paying.
Yeah, that 3 to 5 range, I think the 3.5 to 5 range, I think you said, is, I think, very reasonable, and I think falls in line with a lot of things that we look at too. So I'm very excited about what you're saying here, Becky. A quick question for you, because you look at a lot of financials. What are realistic margins someone can expect on a Linehaul operation?
These people who come in and think they're going to make 20 to 25%, that's just not going to happen right now.
Ooh.
I mean, maybe it does, but I don't see it. I don't see it very often. Most people are more in that 10 to 15%. And I look at it this way. If you invested your money in the stock market, what is a good return you would expect? Maybe 10% if you're doing really good and as volatile as it is. So if you can do that in your business, if you can make more than that in your business, I think you're doing really well. Now, I think some people are making in that 15 to maybe 20% range, just if they're really good businessmen, they know what they're doing. They don't have a lot of debt, so they're not paying a bunch of interest. So, it varies a little bit. I think more people were in that 15 to 20% range, especially during COVID. I think it's dropped some since then.
Interesting. Yeah, I certainly have seen some more recently that were around that 20%. I'll say this, they're, very savvy individuals. The ones that I've seen that are, around 15, maybe a few ticks lower, 2 points lower, are those who have the managers, the ones that they're paying 6 digits for, and maybe have some debts to pay. So that's usually where I would see that. Would you agree? And it's usually the manager and having the bells and whistles.
Yeah. I mean, if you have obviously the more staff you have, the more costs you're going to have. And I always tell these new contractors too, outsource where you can. That helps with the bottom line in a lot of cases. Don't hire a bunch of people until you know really where you're going to be. You need to learn the ropes on your own too before you kind of start hiring people, just so you know what to hire.
Yeah. Great point. All right, we've been waiting on our third panelist. He's finally arrived, so I'm going to bring him into the session. Let's bring in Darius in his fancy living room. What's up?
Hey guys, how you doing? Good. Let me move this over here because I'm just like
Darius likes to be slightly, off center. It makes him Makes it look very regal, I guess you could say.
I'll try it this way. How's that look?
That looks great, man.
All right. Good.
And now we can see the
Welcome.
grand piano.
Yeah, on his days off, he just sits there and kind of plays along, you know. So we were just I don't know if you're listening in the background. We just got through, the technical fundamental side evaluation, how Becky thinks about it. I kind of want to shift this to, the new contractor side, or even anyone buying business, and kind of ask all three of you, which is, what are the most common red flags that you see when people go into purchasing a business? Becky, if you don't mind, I want to kick it to you first.
I get it first.
If you don't mind, you can even take a 20-second pause if you want. We're on no strict time schedule here.
How about if you repeat the question? I wasn't really paying attention. I was busy looking at the grand piano and thinking about, what songs I like to hear.
We're hitting that point in the session where it's like, just kind of look at the images.
The ADHD is starting to kick in. I think I saw a squirrel over there.
We encourage it. All right. The question being, what is the most common red flag that you see when people go to purchase a business? Is it asking for historicals? Is it not knowing the business?
When you ask for historicals and they refuse to give them to you, that's never a good sign. There's a lot of red flags. I mean, the age of the trucks, when they tell you that their trucks are 500,000 miles, but then you get their financials and they have no repair costs. It's like, I don't think that's right. That's why I don't look at historicals, because you can put anything you want in them, right? I mean, common sense would tell me if you have trucks with 500,000 miles, you probably have repair costs, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of red flags out there.
Good point. I mean, Morgan, Darius, any thoughts? Like things people should be on the lookout for that they don't usually consider?
I think Becky hit the nail on the head. Maintenance cost is probably one of your deltas in your business, and it can make or break you. And it's the most variable cost, in my humble opinion, that you can experience. You can expect to pay maintenance, right? You just can't expect. You can't expect an amount. You're gonna pay something. You have to know what it is. And there's been days where you have no breakdowns, weeks, months, where you're like, oh man, my maintenance plan is really working. And then there's some times where every single truck breaks the same week. I mean, literally every single truck. You can't prepare for that. You cannot prepare for it. So Becky's right there. And
Darius, let me ask you, if you don't mind, let me ask quickly about the truck. So let's say I'm buying a business and it's coming with trucks. So I'm just gonna toss a figure out here. Let's say it has 500,000 miles on it. 4 years old, 3 years old. What would you say? And it's hard to put a value on it. What would you say someone should expect to pay in maintenance on it?
So the rule of thumb used to be $15,000 annually per truck, right? That was like just a broad stroke number that who knows made it up. Someone in the terminal somewhere said, "Oh, expect to pay 15%, maintenance annually." Now, even at that's roughly what, $1,200, $1,300 a month that you're spending. Let's call it, $350 a week per truck of a cost if you use that number, right? But you got older trucks, it could easily be $20,000 a year. Even on the lease tractors, there are some maintenance costs associated with it, because especially what's happening now with the cameras being installed and the ELDs and the trimmels and everything else, it may be easier for you to swap out 5 tires on a lease tractor yourself as opposed to dropping off the Penske just because of the downtime. So you're going to eat some costs across the board on maintenance. You just are. No way around it. And parts are in back order. Parts that were $300 are $900 now. So that $15K number annually per tractor, it's out the window. I don't think that's the number.
Becky, do you see an average across the industry for maintenance?
It's something we haven't looked a lot at, but I mean, as an average, because it really is dependent on the age of your trucks. I've seen people who are running 500,000 mile trucks that, 30,000 a year is not unheard of. You have a couple of wiring harnesses go out, just your normal maintenance, oil change and tires, and this goes wrong and that goes wrong, and it doesn't take much. You might get an oil leak or whatever. It doesn't take long to have a $5,000 bill at the shop, and you have that 5-6 times a year. You're at that 30 grand. So that I see that quite frequently. Obviously, the newer the trucks, or if you've got a good lease program, where they cover a lot of the maintenance and there's warranty, then, their maintenance costs are going to be a lot less, probably in that 10,000 range. Because you're always going to have tires and you're always going to have, oil changes, and you're going to have to do your preventative maintenance on those, and that's going to cost you something. But I think you're better off paying a little bit more for a truck or leasing a truck and not running those older trucks, because they're too unpredictable.
Interesting. If it's an assigned run, would we kind of make that caveat?
Yeah, and you
get a new
that's
an unassigned run.
Yeah, that's the other thing. If you have assigned runs, you don't want to be missing those runs, so you don't want your trucks down.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
And the leasing programs, they've evolved over the years. They used to be, I've only been doing this since 2014, but I think over the years we've had, probably 100 plus tractors and every make, model, brand, manufacturer. And, to be honest with you, when you used to go to even your local little guy, whether it was Bentley or Miller Truck Leasing, you'd say, hey, I have a FedEx run. They'd work hard to get those trucks out to you the same day or the next day. Now it's kind of a shrug of the shoulders. Penske, Ryder, they do the same thing. And it's not because they don't want to fix it. Sometimes they just can't. They're dealing with industry problems too. They can't hire diesel mechanics. They got bottom lines. Hell, man, they got investors. The same parts that we want, they want. And then again, when you factor in the safety technology and all that stuff, they may not be able to get you a like-for-like sub. Then you have to factor in not just the repair cost, but what about the downtime? You're going to miss some revenue. So at least with the own tractors, you can control it a little bit. And it's weird for us. Most of you guys already know, me and Rick have a full service shop, so we can do pretty much anything. But that's not the case for every contractor. So I try to be a little careful on, what I say is a good maintenance plan and program, because a lot of guys don't have 4 mechanics that they can snap their fingers and fix up.
Yeah, fair point. All right, I have a question. And Mario, we talked about this before, but I kind of want to, hear what you say on it again and hear about some kind of thoughts on it, which is a new contractor that comes on, they buy a run, they are getting into this, they're kind of excited about it, but also kind of scared. What do you see them, fast forward 6 months, that what are the most common issues they have? Like things they didn't expect and now are an issue for them, or like what things should they be expecting that they didn't expect before? Maybe it's a better way of putting it.
So I think, to both Becky and Darius's point, is the maintenance cost. So, they get trucks sold to them and all of a sudden now these trucks need major repairs on them that, they weren't aware of, or, something came up, tractor broke down on the side of the road. Now they have to get towed to the shop and they have to get it repaired, and they don't necessarily have those maintenance people there. So now they're trying to find somebody to be able to service their trucks that they're probably paying an arm and a leg for. So not having that in place. And then I think also like the safety portion of it. So not understanding how to really manage their KIs, what FedEx is expecting of them, but also the calculation and the way that FedEx does the safety scores. A brand new business coming in, with only 2 or 3 runs, they get one roadside inspection and a bad roadside inspection, and that's it. They're done. They're going from a tier 5 to a tier 1, which can really impact them negatively for quite some time, because it's going to take time for them to build back up. So I think those are 2 pretty big factors for new businesses that are coming in. And talking a little bit before about, red flags for a business, I'd say not only looking at the A1, but trying to figure out what it is that the business is actually doing. Okay, so contractor says that they have an assigned run, but you look at their A1 and there's nothing on their A1. So what is it really that they're doing? Do they really have an assigned run? Is it something, that a station put out there that they're just doing on a temporary basis? Is it what is it that they're buying into? Even with unassigned runs, I've seen it where runs have gone, I don't know what the standards are anymore, but it used to be you would be able to temp assign a run for 6 to 8 months and be able to have somebody running that. And if somebody's trying to sell that to you, that's guaranteed that you're going to have it, it's not guaranteed. An unassigned run is an unassigned run, and that temp assign can be taken away from you at any point in time. So that's not guaranteed either. So really looking into and understanding what the business is that it's running, whether it's spare tractors that are running, whether it's unassigned, assigned, just really understanding the runs behind each truck.
So I think someone as a newcomer can, hearing that, can sometimes be concerned, go like, wait, so what I'm looking at that I should be getting, I might not be getting? Like, how does someone wrap their head around this, going like, well, it can be changed, but this is still good? And I guess maybe the better question to ask is, are people who buy in now, are they still running? Are they still growing? And would now be a good time to still get in?
Yes.
Like that.
all of the guys who have bought in are absolutely still running the runs that they bought into, and I'd say 98% of them are still looking to grow and or have grown. I've seen a lot of people throughout just the couple months that I've been here, them growing and getting growth opportunities and being successful.
Nice. Becky, what are your thoughts? Now a good time to buy into FedEx? Should I wait?
I think now is a great time to buy into FedEx. It's kind of like the stock market. You don't buy when it's high, right? You buy when it's low. And so I think there's just so much out there that, you can't make any money. So I think because of all of the hype out there, runs are actually going cheaper than they were 4 years ago. And so I think now is definitely the best time to buy in. If you're going to buy, do it now.
Hey, Darius, can you steel man the other side? Why is it now not a good time? I'm kidding. You don't have to.
No, I mean, look, we have been on both sides of it. Hey, like, screw FedEx, we're going to do X. Screw X, we're going back to FedEx. We're going to do both. Hey, we're going back to FedEx, and we're going back in a big way. So, in my humble opinion, it goes right back to that money coming into your account every Friday. For all the problems with the FedEx business model, they're probably smaller, or like, let's say, for every negative, there's 10 positives. Let's just say that, right? Everything is not always 100% positive. And what makes FedEx better than anything is that money hitting your account on Friday, right? Every single Friday. So if you have 100 trucks or you have 10 trucks, if you run 75% of them, you can just put them in, you're going to get 75% of your pay. So, it's a lot easier to solve problems when you have money in your account, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm still a proponent for FedEx, especially now with all the tools and the Ricks of the world and everybody else who's coaches and gurus and softwares that analyze the settlement for you. Yeah, man, jump right on in, because the learning curve is not what it used to be. So even then, Morgan, you could probably tell me, like, I remember when me and Rick first started, it was like, in 30 days, it's going to get smoother. In 60 days, you're going to be a pro. In 90 days, you're going to say, what do I do with my day? I don't have anything to do anymore. And I can only think of all the systems and everything else that exist, and all the recruiters, and all the dispatching services, and all the maintenance plans, and all the full service leases. I mean, that's got to be, cut that time in half. In 45 days, you're a pro now.
I like that. I like that a lot. I also like that you keep disappearing because your sweater is green.
Okay.
It's kind of entertaining.
Office, I'm never on this stuff, and then I'm in my office, and this thing is just like, it's caddy corner, because I don't shoot like
yeah.
podcasts.
But you bring up a good point, right? Like FedEx, right? Consistency, and everyone preaches that, and you're exactly right. So good reasons to get in. And then Morgan, I love what you said in terms of, hey, people coming in now, like, they're running, they're even looking at growth. And then kind of, Becky, you put it into a really nice perspective where you're like, yeah, like, buy low. Like, this is the time. Well, this is like not necessarily advice, but it's food for thought, where it's like, this might be the time to buy it. We have FedEx One kind of on the horizon, where more runs might become available. Multiple or prices might be lower now than they were in previous years. So now might be a very reasonable time to get in. All right, guys. With that being said, we're keeping it nice, short and sweet. Any other questions? Anything you guys want to leave people with? No? Okay. Well then, just very quickly, we're always here to help anyone who wants to get into the space, or anyone who's currently in the space, Linehaul Solutions. But Becky also very experienced. Becky, but Becky works with Linehaul Central, right?
Linehaul Central. Yep.
Beautiful. Tell me, how can people reach you for help?
You go to our website, Linehaul Central, and there's numbers on there that you can call. Just reach out to us, and even just put an inquiry on the website, and someone will give you a call, and we can tell you what we can do to help you. Safety is our big thing. Safety and financials.
Awesome. Which are massive things you need to be concerned with in FedEx. So by all means, reach out to Becky. All right, guys. Thank you all very, very much. Appreciate it. And that's it for episode 4 of Valuations.